Deep Exploration was on contract to companies to provide data, their own proprietary data set. And so when we, or Dad did not, when his crews were not out acquiring data for someone else, then he was pretty smart about this. He decided he'd go and put them out to start acquiring data for his own, for a library, to build up a library of data that he owned. And so he started building that up. And then as time went by, he worked with oil companies where they would go ahead and say, well, hey, niece, we've got this area covered. You have this area, this other area we would like to trade. Can we trade? And with the right for you to license that data down the line. And so that's how he built up, where he didn't acquire the data, where Dad didn't acquire the data with his own crews. He would trade with companies with the right to license that data and use it in his Gravity library. Well, at that time, companies like Dad pretty much had a pretty large database that others did not have. And so Mr. George Law Sr. would come to Dad and broker his data. Mr. Law would broker his data. Other companies would broker his data. There were other companies in business, too, that had Gravity databases. Mr. Craig Ferris, with the company he had, was called Gravimetrics. And that ended up with his son, John Ferris, and John has some time ago turned that over to us to broker for him. And so we do have the Ferris data set. We have the the gravity map of our own data, and we also have the ability to broker the photogravity data set, which they have data in Alaska and other areas that we don't have data, and we can broker it. Photogravity was in business for many years, as you remember, Corrine, and it was a contract company. And they went out on their own, too, and created data sets that are built, acquired data of their own. And so that ended up, there is no longer a Photogravity Corporation. It's ended up with CGG, which Jeff Rowe worked with.
We contacted Mike Hall, who in 1970, he opened EdCon with Tom LaFair with the primary purpose of doing land acquisition. But they soon moved into marine acquisition, and they covered a great deal of the Northern Gulf.
My name is Michael Hall, and our company name is EdCon PR. We've been in this gravity and magnetics business for about 52 years. Well, I was an old programmer, computer programmer, and they needed somebody to build a data center and put in a new computer. So I did that. We did some good work there, and we use gravity with a lot of our customers because it's such a complementary aid to the seismic industry, and also with magnetic data, which is widely used in this industry now as something that's useful, and the government's pushing a lot of it now because they're searching for strategic minerals, and now they're big program for abandoned wells, for orphaned wells.
So you're actually doing the work, some of the gravity work for the government right now, is that correct? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Why it's useful.
We're doing mainly magnetic work for the government, magnetics and radiometrics, and they're searching for rare earths, the mineral industry, but their big push, which we said in a conference yesterday, was to find all the abandoned and orphaned wells around this country, of which there may be 2 million, and they don't know where they are, but they need to find out. Magnetic is going to help. Gravity could help, but it's probably difficult for what they want. They want something that's low, close to the ground, high intensity, and the magnetics is probably one of the good targets. But gravity is really useful in our business because it's so complementary and can be acquired right along with marine seismic. It rides along on the boat and doesn't interfere. It's passive measurement, but it's helps clarify what they're seeing on their seismic data. But a lot of the offshore work, gravity and magnetic really help clarify what they're looking at. They don't make so many horrible mistakes. Having worked in the first company I got into the gravity business with was Dr. Louis Nettleton, who is just a real giant in this industry. And, you know, everybody in the gravity world knows Louis Nettleton, and we speak of doing Nettleton profiles to try to analyze what the density should be for reducing the gravity data. And he was a great man. Dr. Lacoste is another man that was interesting to know.
Do you know Ambassador?
Yeah, I did.
Let's talk about Lacoste.
Dr. Lacoste he kind of looked like Lyndon Johnson, which wouldn't have been his favorite politician, I'm sure. But he was tall and interesting and talked slow, but he was a good Texas boy. And he used to teach at the University of Texas and thought he'd start making gravity meters in his garage. And he made a few and he never got back to teaching. He was brilliant. He was a brilliant physicist, but he talked slow and he was careful and he treated everybody, even if you didn't know what he was saying, he'd make an effort to make sure you understood. He was just a prince of a man, yeah.
The next people I invited to join us are the McNabbs. Kevin McNabb started 40 years ago in the land acquisition business. And in those 40 years, he has crossed, you name it, the terrains, he's been there, and the temperatures, he's been there. So he's a perfect person to talk about the durability and the reliability of the Lacoste-Rambert LNR system. I call it the LNR system.
Hey, Kevin McNabb, owner of MWH. We have offices in Canada, U.S. We've been doing potential field geophysics for 45 years. Started in 1980, primarily doing gravity surveys, more recently gravity plus magnetics. I started the company after corporate shuffles in other geophysical contractors that I worked with left me either having to reestablish their businesses or start out on our own. I worked for Geotechs for a number of years after graduation, and then moved out to Western Canada and worked for Kenting Exploration, I believe they were called, primarily a seismic, but they did some vegetables. After I graduated, I worked for Geotechs for a number of years. They used, as most people did at the time, Lacoste and Rambert gravity meters. When I moved out to Western Canada, it was the same situation. We had heard of different sorts of meters, older Warden meters, but they weren't in commercial use. And I stuck with those. Once I started out on our own, we purchased LMR meters on the used market, and we stuck with them pretty much exclusively through the last 45 years. I believe in the 1990s and early 2000s, we used Centrex gravity, but in the end, that I had heard of Warden meters, but they were discounted as old technology, even in the 1980s. So I think even to this day, I've never actually put my eyes on a Warden gravity meter. In the late 90s and maybe early 2000s, we purchased a number of Centrex gravity meters. But we ended up going back to the Lacoste and Ramberts and sold the Centrexes and stayed with those meters right through to current day. They are definitely the workhorse. They've been reliable. They're in climatic regions. They're particularly good in cold weather. Yeah, they've always performed. The later iterations of them before LNR was no longer added electronic feedback and the ability to stream data from them. So we updated all our meters to that newer technology, and yeah, that's where we work with. Today, you would have to buy it on the used market, and if it didn't already have those electronic feedback updates, then you would have to source to add those up. So it would be a little bit of a do-it-yourself operation to get that alarm, get it up to the most current specs. It wouldn't be something that absolutely is technology, but in my mind, it's still an excellent meter to base your business. They're small, they're lightweight. You can easily add additional batteries to them or larger batteries to them for cold weather operation. They're not heavy to carry around. They're reliable. And operations that, that cannot be overestimated. If there's another instrument that promises a couple of microgels better resolution, well, that's fine. But is it reliable? And the reliability will trump incremental improvements in accuracy. I often note that we only work in two places in the world: those places that are too hot and those places that are too cold. There aren't very many gravity surveys. There aren't very many exploration surveys that are done in places that you would want to go to. We've done decades of work in Africa. Temperature can be 45, 50 degrees C. We've done multiple decades of work in North Canada where we're getting the inverse of that and seeing minus 40, minus 50. These are brutal conditions, people. They're brutal conditions for and the reliability of instrumentation is just so important. Something that might have reliability concerns in a normal environment, in a normal climate, in the extreme climates, those potential reliability concerns are going to be breakdowns. There's no getting around it. Any product deficiency in our normal is going to be a crew shutdown in climates. So reliability, you can't overestimate it, and you cannot base a geophysical contracting company on instrumentation that's not reliable. The longevity of the instrumentation is quite remarkable. There is no other instrument that we use, surveying instruments, magnetometers. There's nothing else we use that has lasted as long as the LNR instrumentation. It's income to buy something now and anticipate using it 45 years from now. In a lot of cases, it's hard to imagine using what you buy now in 4.5. So, one of the gravity meters we purchased was serial number 148. I can't tell you exactly when it was made, but it was probably in the 1950s. That instrument was a stalwart in our geophysical equipment inventory until it got caught up in a civil war in northern Ethiopia a year and a half ago. So from the 1950s to 2021, that instrument was involved in or continued to operate. And it was only an African civil war that got it out of our operational fleet. I know exactly where it is. It has not moved from where we stashed it. There are two grounds there. At some point in time, they may resurface and they may be put back into use. Multiple success stories. But as a contractor, you certainly want your clients to do well, but at the end of the day, that's their business. Our business is to do a good job, no matter the outcome of the survey. But yeah, over the decades, we've been involved in numerous discoveries. So again, in 2003, I got a phone call and was invited over to a job in East Africa, part of Africa. There weren't a whole lot of details provided. I got on a plane, ended up in the region, took a 6-hour Land Cruiser ride from the capital city out to the exploration property, met with an old school project geologist who, rather than inviting me in and introducing himself, simply stated that a test in this particular and carry on, and if it didn't work, there was a Lufthansa flight on Friday. So we went out and carried out the test. Looked fairly good. We carried on for the 9 days. So there was an EM crew, electromagnetic crew, as well as a geochemical crew on site. And gravity data has enough different components or enough different influences on it that it's very rare that you can actually see or know what's happening when you operate in a field. The numbers have too many different variables. But in this particular project, I was able to observe on the gravity meter a very anomalous and large change in readings. It was so large, they stopped surveying, went back a couple hundred meters, reread the point, and then moved back where I was, noted the difference, and then at the end of the day returned to camp and probably a little bit full of myself, told everybody that they could pretty much stop what they're doing, that we had found the mine. Of course, they looked at me, well, probably not thinking much of me. One of the junior geologists and I sat down, picked a drill target. He convinced the management that he could get one shot at it. He got one drill hole. They hit massive sulfides at 60 meters, indeterminate depths. And that was 17 years ago, and the mine is still in operation. Central African country of Chad, we were working for a major oil company, and they had been doing 2D seismic in the area, very large area, huge regional exploration property, and they were relatively difficult to work for, and they everything pretty close to their best. But at the end of the project, their senior geophysicist told me, he only told me one, was that the 6-month-long survey he had undertaken across the entire area had given him a better understanding of the regional geology than 2 decades of 2D seismic. And again, he didn't tell me that twice. That was one candid admission and then they probably got on our case about something. But it always good to hear. And market for geophysics is certainly one of the stronger ones in the world. Unlike oil and gas, where the in-field people are skeptical, there's a bit of a division on the interpretive geophysicists as to whether they want to do it or not. Nevada's not like that. Nevada and the mining industry there, the geothermal industry there, have been using gravity for decades. It is a widely used technique. It's been used for gold and silver, barite, for gold, silver exploration, for barite, for geothermal. There's never been any hesitancy about the technology in Nevada.
AirGrav, that stands for Airborne Inertially Referenced Gravimeter. Technology became possible as GPS accuracy improved. The accelerations that the aircraft undergoes due to turbulence and movement of the aircrafts are several orders of magnitude higher than the accelerations that we measure to determine the gravity below the aircraft. So we use the gravity data to determine the changes in the density of the geology below the aircraft, and that can be for up to 10 kilometers below the surface of the Earth. The AirGrav system combines an inertially stabilized platform and accelerometers to measure the gravity, not only the vertical gravity, but the horizontal components of the gravity as well. And that is unique in the world of airborne gravity. So one of the special things about the AirGrav system is that it can be flown in normal daytime conditions in all kinds of different terrains. So we've flown it in mountains, in the desert, over water, and we can fly it in a helicopter or a fixed-wing aircraft. So it's been used for all kinds of applications. So originally sort of mainly thought of for oil and gas exploration, but it's also used for mineral exploration. It's used for research projects and for now a lot of geodesy work all around the world. So countries need to determine the geoid in their country for accurate mapping of their country, and the airborne gravity is excellent. The AirGrav system works really well for that application. The instrument was developed starting around 1990. It took about 10 years of development work before we actually got it to be usable on surveys. It was all developed in-house entirely. Yeah, we did have some help from a couple of universities. So we gave contracts to some universities in Canada and the States to do some research work. But in general, it was done with our engineers and technicians at SGL. Geophysics didn't really do a lot of ground gravity work before we did airborne gravity. However, we did all the other types of airborne acquisition, radiometrics, magnetics, EM work. And he felt that airborne gravity was something that could be added to the work that we're doing. And currently we can fly all the techniques at the same time in one aircraft. So we can fly a survey where we're acquiring radiometrics, magnetics, EM, and gravity all together. And the more information you can gather, the better you can model the geology that you're trying to model below the aircraft. Interesting applications of the AirGrav system has been our work with NASA. So we've flown in the Arctic and the Antarctic, studying ice depth, so glacier depth and so on. And they use the gravity to model what's below the ice. So There may be lakes, there may be mountains, basically, in Antarctica below the ice, and the airborne gravity is useful for modeling that. So that's a really interesting application. Also, we've done a lot of really large surveys, oil and gas exploration in the Middle East, in North Africa, and those are, I think we could be really proud of those. Also working in some really difficult environments, flying in Papua New Guinea, flying in Greenland, northern Canada, in the deserts, in remote Mauritania. I think those sort of projects have been difficult and really interesting and highlights, I guess. More and more countries are using gravity to model their geoids, so for geodetic reasons, and that's become a big business for us. Also, helicopter core and air gravity for mineral exploration, so those are smaller, higher resolution projects, are becoming more and more important. As I believe there was a gap in airborne geophysics, which was good, high quality airborne gravity. My father felt that that was something that Center Geophysics could fill. He was always interested in technology and in instrument development. And he loved working with the engineers and trying to figure out how to solve a problem. He was very tenacious. He didn't believe it when people said, something couldn't be done. He liked to work through a problem and come up with a solution. So I really think he liked the technical side of geophysics.
Then we've invited Scott Hammond. He joined John Brett early in the building of Bell Geospace. And so he's going to tell us a little bit of the history of that, and also of taking a military-developed instrumentation and adapting it for the oil and gas exploration business.
My name is Scott Hammond. I'm the president and CEO of Bell Geospace. I'm coming up on 25 years with the company here in November. Started out as operations manager, and I took over as president in 2000. So Bell Geospace started in about 1994. Our founder was a gentleman named John Brett. And John is one of the remaining pioneers in the industry of inertial navigation. He spent early part of his career with Singer Kerfoot and a couple of other companies, but essentially was the CEO of that company, and then moved over and got involved with the Defense Department with the same technology. Back in the day, this was pre-GPS days, and the only way that you could really get a good handle on where things were and how they were moving was to use an inertial system. And so the pioneers in inertial systems knew that understanding the gravity field was a critical part of that. And so there were multiple ways they were looking to try to exploit that question, and the gravity gradiometer was the one that really made the difference. Now that's in 1970s, 50 years ago, and believe it or not, this is the only working gravity gradiometer to this day in existence that works on a moving platform. So at the time it was Bell Aerospace who made this first gravity gradiometer. That became Textron and then became Lockheed Martin. So Lockheed Martin still is the only manufacturer of a gravity gradiometer, and there's been a lot of people who've tried and spent billions of dollars in doing so, and they don't have another system that works right now. So it was used on the Trident submarines, and then in the 1990s, kind of when the Cold War ended, there was a dual-use initiative where they wanted to take some of this military technology and become commercial. And so John Brett at the time was an undersecretary of the Navy, and he looked at the data from the gravity gradiometer and said, I'm seeing something here that doesn't look like just the surface. And so he took it to a group at Lamont Doherty in New York and had them look at the data with him. And it became pretty clear that what they were seeing was salt. And so there was a bit of a eureka moment that if we can see salt and we can model the salt, there's some people in the Gulf of Mexico and other parts of the world that would really be able to use that data. And so that's kind of where Bell Geospace was born. As I mentioned earlier, the original founder of the company, of the technology, was Bell Aerospace. And so it's kind of a tip of the hat to them. John named his new company Bell Geospace, and we were off and running. And John Brett retired probably in the right around 2005 or 6. I can't remember exactly. He's actually still around. He's still a consultant for the company, and I still love to call John and pick his brain. It's funny when you sit down with John and ask him some questions. So this technology is still controlled by the State Department. There's still some secrets there, and you can always tell when you're getting close to one of those secrets because John gets a little gleam in his eye and a smile on his face. And you realize that if he told you, he'd have to kill you. So Bell Geospace started with the FTG, the full tensor gradiometer, in, like I said, 1994 when the company was founded. And during that time, between 94 and our first commercial survey in 98, John Brett was developing the technology for use commercially. So what that involved was very interesting. He had to, first of all, go out to the Navy and get a contract for a ship to go out and do a test survey, which he did. Being involved with the Defense Department, he had a lot of good contacts and was able to have them provide a Navy vessel that we used to go out and do the testing. And that was the data that he used to take to Lamont Doherty and show them what we were seeing and get the go-ahead that this was really going to be helpful to the oil and gas. After that, John sat down with Lockheed Martin and was able to come up with an exclusive contract for the only full tensor gradiometer in the world at the time. There was a slightly different version called the partial tensor gradiometer that was being used by BHP, a large minerals company, and they were using it to look for minerals. But for the oil and gas business, John had an exclusive contract for the only FTG that was working in the world.
Kevin McNabb started 40 years ago in the land acquisition business. His son, we wanted him to, he's taken the helm this year and of the company. And we've invited him to discuss what he thinks is the future in the gravity instrumentation, gravity surveying.
My name is Marshall McNabb. I'm the president and CEO of MWH Geosurveys. We're an exploration geophysics company with more than 40 years in the industry, doing ground gravity and now some UAV airborne surveys. I think they're excellent. I think the exploration industry is booming right now. Obviously, it's cyclical in nature, but right now it's a very strong point. I think technologically, we're at a tipping point, moving into kind of a new generation. But as you guys have mentioned, a lot of the equipment that we're still using and the technology traces its roots back quite a long ways, and we're still using some of the original equipment that was produced quite a while ago. So we're using Lacoste and Romberg gravity meters that have been updated with electronic feedback and reading. The core of the instrument, the LNR G meter, traces its roots back for decades and is, really a piece of geophysical history. But that doesn't stop it from being a perfectly adequate modern meter, an exceptional modern meter, because the core of the instrument has been proven over decades. And what we've done to move it into the future is add ancillary devices onto it. So it has a Bluetooth connection and it's connected with the GPS tablet. So we know where the readings are being taken and when they are. But the core of the unit is still, the original G-meter spring back from the LNR days. At MWH, we are constantly pushing the envelope of what equipment manufacturers like their equipment to be doing. So frequently we're operating in temperatures below -40. We're operating in extreme desert environments, extreme heat, extreme cold. We've pushed the boundaries on all fronts, and so far the equipment has held up, or we've worked with manufacturers to revise it when we find a point that it can't quite make it to. We generally have very good reliability with our equipment in all types of extremes. Reliability is so important for us because the jobs that we do are in such remote locations that if we have equipment failure, it can mean significant project delays where we have to fly equipment into a remote job site or get it halfway around the world. I mean, there's really it's not feasible to do on-site repair or to send equipment out for repair. So we need equipment that we can trust 100% of the time in all types of conditions. I think gravity exploration gives us a unique opportunity to travel around the world to, as I mentioned, very exciting, remote, extreme environments, it allows us the opportunity to perform a really precise geophysical survey that increases in utility over time as we continue to refine the process and add in modern technologies like new digital elevation models and combining it with other survey technologies.